Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well. I hope I don't stand between you and lunch. But there's Paul. He will take that billion. So my name is Doris Mengo. I work with the Kenya Accreditation Service as the manager in charge of medical laboratory accreditation. So for today, I'll be taking you through the role of PT in medical laboratory accreditation. Well, I've had a lot of good things when it comes to what the mentors are doing with the labs before they come in for accreditation. Okay, thank you for that. So, in the past recent years, we have seen huge investments when it comes to improving of healthcare or the quality of healthcare in Africa. So, we have seen support coming from the UN to fight HIV, TB, and malaria. We have seen support coming from PEPFAR. We've also seen support coming from World Bank as well as the Gates Foundation. And this has been to strengthen public health, to save life, reduce mobility, as well as improve patients' quality of life. And you can actually agree with me that the investment has really been heavy, right? It's been in terms of billions, oh no, millions of US dollars that have been invested in Africa for these activities. So the efforts to expand these services has actually drawn attention to the need to have competent laboratories in place in order to deal with the challenges of malaria, HIV, and tuberculosis. So what does that mean? It means that we need to have laboratory testing, and laboratory testing becomes very important, a very important component when it comes to improvement of healthcare, especially in resource-trained countries like the countries we come from. So, what do we need to do, or what has been done? PEPFAR, as well as the other support partners, have put in a lot of money when it comes to laboratory testing. So, laboratory testing has actually expanded in Africa over the last about 12 years. But even with the expand in laboratory testing comes issues regarding errors, right? So, expanding, money being put in, but of course, this will be associated with quite a number of errors. So when it comes to diagnosis, of course, there are quite a number of steps. And I think I'm in another slide. You can just go ahead. The next slide, please. Oh, yes, there. So, of course, errors will be there when it comes to diagnosis because there are quite a number of steps. A number of steps coming from, identification of the right patients, collecting the samples, labeling of the samples, bringing in the samples for testing, having the right, the right operator testing, having IQC and EQ in place, reporting results, etc. So all those steps, multi-steps, will definitely be associated with quite a number of errors. So then what shall we do to ensure that we deal with these errors as they arise? So the next slide, please. So how then shall we manage these errors? Because there will always be errors in these multi-steps that we are having in laboratory testing. The first thing we need to do is actually implement a quality management system. And while implementing a quality management system, we will definitely, one, ensure that we use competent staff, ensure that our equipments have been calibrated, validate or verify methods. Of course, if they're standard methods, then they would just need to be verified. Then, of course, the use of internal quality control to deal with the errors, and of course, issues regarding risk management, which has to be done across board from pre-examination, examination, and post-examination processes. And of course, very important to ensure that we implement in corrective actions when it comes to any non-conformities that we would have identified across our systems. And of course, one very key component becomes proficiency testing, because proficiency testing is able to check our systems from pre-examination all the way to reporting of results. So then what is the role of PT when it comes to issues of laboratory, and especially monitoring and reducing errors in the laboratory? Of course, one thing is, if we need to monitor, if we need to implement a quality management system, PT comes very handy, right? So one thing, when it comes to accreditation, a laboratory cannot be accredited without what? Participating in a proficiency testing. And of course, it becomes the requirement of ISO 15189 to ensure that laboratories participate in EQA. And that is one of the confidences that accreditation bodies have when it comes to your laboratory accreditation, to see that laboratories are implementing or participating in EQA, and in case they fail them, they do a corrective actions. We have to really agree that error is to human, right? So there is no expectation that you shall get 100%. And in case we don't get 100%, then there would be need for us to do what? Corrective actions, right? So PT becomes a very important tool to enable us monitor the processes across board at the end of the day. So then what are the benefits of participating in EQA and in line with laboratory accreditation? The first thing is, of course, identifying if there are any problems within our systems, right? And of course, if we find there is a problem, we will then need to put a corrective action. Then the other thing is trying to compare measurement procedures. You could be having more than one measurement procedure for one type of test. Let's take, for example, hematology. You have probably a Sysmex and another one. Are they going to give you the same results at the end of the day? And of course, you using the PT items, you would be able to check all that. The other thing is, of course, comparing operators, capabilities. You have many people working in the laboratory. At the end of the day, putting the management system in place, putting all that we need to put in place, are they able to give us the same results or not? While we use PT, we can actually assure that. And of course, when it comes to accreditation, these are some of the things we will be checking, but PT can actually assist us to do all this. The next thing is, of course, trying to compare analytical systems in our laboratories. The other thing is, of course, improving performance. I feel in my IQC, my system is not working appropriately, then I would need to put what? A corrective action in place to improve my system. Then the other thing is educating our staff, especially new staff who have come into the laboratory. We can use the PT items to do exactly that. Remember, when it goes to the requirements of 15189, education becomes very important. Aspects of competence assessment, the continuous monitoring of your staff become very important, and we can actually use the PT materials, especially where the PT provider is able to give you access. I hope HuQAS does that. If they're able to give you access, then you will be able to use these samples to check if your staff or to educate your staff. The other thing would be, the other benefit would be the exchange of information with your PT provider. I believe your PT provider, because it's a service that they need to be giving you, would have meetings with you every so often. And if there are issues regarding your system that has been identified from the PT, then this discussion would need to go in. Then the other thing is instilling confidence. But confidence when it comes to the staff, management, and external users of the laboratories. And external users here would be your patients, right? Doctors, researchers, right? You have researchers who use your facilities. Of course, your management would have confidence that you're doing the right thing because you're passing your EQA. But in that case, I hope we are doing EQA in the right way, like the same way we do it. Handle a patient, sample, and not waiting. When the EQA comes, that's the time we shower. That's the time we clean the laboratory. That's the time we calibrate our equipment for us to ensure our PT is working. Yet, when we are doing the patient samples, we don't take all that into consideration. Then the other thing, of course, it can be used to do it. Calculate our measurement uncertainties. Then the other benefit when it comes to PT It can be used as an IQC material, right? I know sometimes purchasing IQC material or any other third-party IQC material might be quite expensive. So if we have just PT materials then from our providers, we can use them for that purpose. And of course, determining measurement precision and trueness. But the back of it all, while doing all this, is to ensure that we are fulfilling the requirements of the accreditation body, right? 15189 clause 5.6 talks about participating in PT, right? So for you to be accredited or for you to even enroll in accreditation, then you would need to satisfy the accreditation body by participating in in PT, but not only participating, but passing the PT, right? So of course, then what is the international requirement when it comes to PT participation, and especially for medical laboratory? One, all accreditations body work under the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation, that is ILAC. And it's the policy of ILAC to ensure that medical laboratories, testing laboratories, calibration laboratories participate in PT. Then, of course, it is the same requirement of 15189 to ensure that medical laboratories participate in PT that meet the requirements of ISO 17043. That is the standard for proficiency testing providers. So what is the requirement of 15189 when it comes to proficiency testing? I will take you to the standard clause 5.6.3.1, where it says the laboratory shall participate in an interlaboratory comparison program, such as those of the EQA or PT, appropriate to examine and interpretation, appropriate to the examination and interpretation of examination results. The other bit says the laboratory shall monitor the results of the interlaboratory comparison programs and participate in the implementation of corrective action when predetermined performance criteria are not fulfilled. Then it goes ahead and gives us a note which is not really a requirement but a guidance. And it says the laboratory shall participate in interlaboratory comparison programs that fulfill the requirements of ISO 17043. That was the requirement of ISO 15189 2012. But right now, we have a new standard that is coming out. That is ISO 15189. It will be 2020, 2022, or 2023. But currently, we have the final draft international standard that is out for balloting. I hope some of you work closely with your national standards body. So the final draft international standard is actually out. And when it comes to issues of PT, this is what it says. It says that, and that is clause 7.3.7.3. It says that the laboratory shall monitor its performance of examination method by comparison with results of other laboratories. It goes ahead and says this includes participation in EQA programs appropriate to the examination and interpretation of examination results, including point of care, testing examination methods. Then part D of the same clause says the EQA program selected by the laboratory shall, to extent possible, number one, have the effect of checking pre-examination, examination, and post-examination processes. Number two, provide samples that mimic patient samples for clinically relevant challenges. And the last one, fulfill the requirements of ISO 17043. Previously, in my previous standard, the requirement to participate in a PT scheme that is accredited was not an issue. But now come the next standard that will be released in December or January next year, the participation of PT from a PTP provider that is accredited becomes mandatory, right? So that's something we need to have in mind as we move on. So that calls us to do what? Use PT providers that are accredited. For example, HuQAS, who has called us here. And I'm glad to say that HuQAS has been accredited by KENAS for its services since 2009. So you're in good hands for those who participate for PT that has been provided by HuQAS, and of course there is the evidence. They have a certificate for accreditation. They have been reaccredited many times, so they remain to be competent. So then, what is this accreditation? I know this session is on accreditation, right? So what is this accreditation? Because we have been singing about accreditation for the last 12 years in this continent. We need to go through this so that we all have a basic understanding what it is when it comes to the accreditation body. So accreditation is the formal recognition that an organization is competent to carry out specific processes, activities, or tasks in a reliable, credible, and accurate manner. And of course, we have our own definition from our standards, where it says it is a third-party attestation that a conformity assessment body, and our conformity assessment body here becomes the medical laboratory, that it fulfills requirement and it is competent to carry out specific tasks. That I am accredited as a medical laboratory, but the task is what? Chemistry. But even in chemistry, I'm going down to specific activities, and this could be calcium, phosphorus, etc. So we are not just accrediting the full lab, but specific activities. That's what accreditation means at the end of the day. So now when it comes to medical laboratory accreditation, remember we are here for PT for medical laboratory accreditation. So we need to see what are the requirements for you to get accredited to 15189. Of course, medical laboratory services are very essential when it comes to diagnosis of patients or diagnosis of diseases. And the services of medical laboratories encompass many things. First, from arrangements for requisition, and this is requisition of samples from the patient, preparation of the patient, because that has an impact on the results that we'll be getting, how we identify the patient so that we ensure we are giving the right results to the right patient, collection of the samples, transportation, storage, processing, and of course, interpretation of results at the end of the day. So accreditation is an enabler of quality and a core component of good clinical management. Of course, it is patient-focused, and especially if you're looking at it from the context of ISO 15189. It is impartial, objective, and of course, operates within a peer review model. Peer review model meaning what? The assessors who come to assess you are actually your own peers. They are coming from what? The medical laboratories. They are not coming from the Blues or from ILAC. They are coming from your own medical laboratory. So you're able to work so closely with them. So what is the role of accreditation in healthcare? The primary role, why we do what we do, why you wake up and go to the lab every day, is to ensure that, or accreditation will ensure that you are given consistently high level of care with quality, with quality at the center of it all. The patient is at the center of what we do. If today the patient does not come to the hospital or to our laboratory, then what will happen? We will shut the labs, right? And we go home and we will lack jobs. So we need to know at the center of accreditation then is the patient. So benefits to the patient, of course, the patient is the biggest beneficiary. And remember, we are all patient. We can be patient at some point, right? We've all been patient. So the way you treat that patient is the same way you expect to be treated at the end of the day. Then the other thing is, of course, people, patients, and doctors will get high quality of healthcare at the end of the day. Then, of course, the fact that is accurate and timely diagnosis and proper patient management. And then, of course, when it comes to our bosses, when it comes to the people who pay us, when it comes to the support partner, accreditation will assist us reduce the cost. And this is cost that is associated with risk testing, that is causing unnecessary costs or overheads in our financials. So once we are accredited, or if we are going to implement a quality management systems, issues of retesting will definitely go down. And of course, even when you go back to ask for money, it will be easy to be given because your bosses have actually seen you reducing cost. And but also the cost to the patient. There's someone in the morning who was giving a presentation on cancer. As we know, in Africa, our services are down, for a lack of a better word. So what is happening to most families? They've had to get loans to take their patients where? To India, right? And is it because we cannot diagnose cancer in Africa? We can. It's only that we are not putting proper quality management system across board. I know we have started off with HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis, but then we can go to these other areas so that we reduce the cost that is associated with healthcare when it comes to our patients, right? Then we will see less patients go to other countries for these services. And of course, it assists with the referral system of an organization or the country. The other thing, it improves patient relationships, so relationships within organization. But the first one between the patient and the laboratory, patients and their doctors, doctors and their who, and the medical laboratory, so that they are not called by what Julie said, the laboratory people, right? We don't want those names. But if we do the right thing, and this is something I have seen over the last 10 years of accreditation, there's been change in attitude in laboratories that have been accredited, change in attitudes of the clinicians, because right now they trust the results that are coming from the medical laboratories. There is change in a sense that clinicians are able to sit down with the medical laboratory personnel to have candid discussion on the management of the patient. So if we do this, then it becomes so much easier to deal with our clinicians, to deal with the patients, to deal with our employers, to deal with the regulators at the end of the day, and hopefully to deal with your salaries. Because you remember, doctors and nurses, they have their salaries up there because they are able to justify their work. And how do we justify our work? We can justify it in this sense, when we give quality results at the end of the day. Of course, reducing risks that are associated with misdiagnosis, which we have seen over time. But one thing I have seen again over time with accreditation, the risks have come down. They might not have been reduced 100%, but they actually reduced. The other thing is reduced stay, the length of stay in hospitals for patients. Misdiagnosis leads to what? Lack of proper treatment. Lack of proper treatment means patients stay sick forever. They stay sick forever means they don't go to back to work. They stay in forever. That means the cost of healthcare becomes a burden. So just a slight change in our work will change not only our processes, but even the relationships that we have outside. Then, of course, at the end of the day, it promotes trust. As I had said earlier, trust with your providers, trust with the users who are the clinicians and the patients, and as well as regulators. But it's also a tool of trade. You know, medical healthcare personnel never think that health is equals to trade, that health affects trade. But when you go to the private sector, you realize the leverage on accreditation to ensure that they increase their market space, right? You remember the issue of COVID. You remember what happened? You remember that photo? 3,000 Uganda bound trucks stuck at the border. This was the border between Kenya and what? Uganda. So just because we could not trust each other's results, it ended to this. But what did it mean for the traders? It meant that they lost business, and business in billions. So what we do actually affects local and international and even regional trade. So if we are able to put systems in place for medical laboratories, then things like this would be in the past. So, of course, there are other forms of accreditation to 15189, and that includes diagnostic imaging, very new concept, but all under 15189. So, we shall be accrediting diagnostic imaging to ensure that our patients don't have to use so much money going to America or India. Mostly, that's where Africans would seek in. treatment and diagnosis. Then point of care. The medical laboratory is really doing very well when it comes to diagnosis. But what about point of care? The ICU, the emergency rooms. Something needs to happen there, right? Most of the people who do point of care would be nurses and probably doctors and other people who are non-medical laboratory people. But we need to work with them so that we ensure our patients at the end of the day get the proper treatment. Then I was told to discuss how we prepare for accreditation from the accreditation body perspective. So the first thing, of course, is training people to ISO 15189. And right now you need to run to get training to 15189, either 2022 or 2023 as soon as it comes out. Then document your system in line with the requirements of 15189. The next thing is participate in EQA. EQA for the scope that you are intending to bring for accreditation, calibrate your equipment and maintain them as appropriate, perform method validation or verification, but for medical laboratories, of course, it will be verification. For research laboratories, then that validation aspect will be done. And of course, undertaking uncertainty of measurements as applicable, conducting internal audits, management reviews, and of course, implementing corrective actions where necessary, among other things. So, of course, their management system requirements are in line with 2012 standard. Of course, this changes when it comes to the new standard, but with this old standard, there are legal requirements, very important, especially for private laboratories, regulatory requirements as well, and this will be dependent across countries. Then documentation requirements, ensure that you have referral laboratories. It's not an option for accreditation. You have to have referral laboratories, complaints management, advisory services, internal audit, management reviews, and of course, at the end of the day, demonstrating that you are continuously improving on your system, right? So the accreditation body has to see that you're improving on your system. And one of them is actually working on the corrective actions and implementing them as non-conformities occur in the system. Then the technical side, I think it's much easier. Then, of course, ensuring that all SOPs for the test that you're bringing for accreditation will be there. Of course, having PT, again, from an accredited provider. And for most accreditation bodies like ours would require at least 2 cycles of past EQA. So it's not just a matter of participating in EQA, but actually passing in EQA, because if you fail and there is no corrective action that is substantial, then that means no accreditation for you. Then, of course, issues regarding traceability of measurements. And I think most bodies that are here, you have your own national metrology institutes under your national standards bodies where they can ascertain traceability of measurements because it is a requirement. Then, of course, validation, uncertainties, and laboratory information system is applicable. Then, very important just to go back while you're doing your internal audits to make sure that everything is prepared or you are prepared before doing the formal application for accreditation. So the application process, and this is the application process from the KENAS side. And I think it applies across board from SANAS and the other 10 accreditation bodies in Africa. So, of course, you need to submit application form, well-filled, accreditation agreements, then your documented management systems, and, of course, results of PT. So you cannot do without PT when you are applying for accreditation. Then once we have received your documentation, the next thing that we shall be doing is a desk audit, what we call document review. And this is for the ABs to check if you are complying to the requirements of the standard, if you have documented your system in line with the requirements of the standard. If any gaps are identified, then you are told in advance before people come in to your laboratory for the initial assessment. Then the next thing that you will do is conduct an initial assessment, come in physically to check if the laboratory is doing what it said it will do in line with their documentation, right? Then you're given time to implement any corrective action if any non-conformity was identified. And if you close that successfully, then you are issued with an accreditation certificate. For KENAS, for example, it would be a 4-year accreditation certificate. And of course, after that, you will pay fees that are related to that process. So then who offers international accreditation? So international laboratories should seek accreditation from internationally recognized accreditation bodies. And these are bodies that are signatories to ILAC and IAF. So ILAC is International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation. So accreditation bodies, of course, work in line with standards as much as the labs work in line with standards 15189. The accreditation bodies as well have to implement standards, and they implement 17/11. Once they implement that, then they become signatories to ILAC. So KENAS has a number of signatories, ILAC itself, as well as AFRAC, which is the African Accreditation Corporation. So who is KENAS? Now that I have a chance to talk about KENAS. So KENAS is the accreditation body set by the Kenyan government, and it is a signatory to ILAC, International Accreditation Forum, that is IAF, as well as African Accreditation Corporation, that is the corporation for accreditation bodies in Africa. It's also a member of the East African accreditation system within the EAC, and we operate in line with the requirements of 17/11, which is mandatory for you, especially when it comes to trade across board. So the services that we are offering currently, we offer medical lab accreditation, proficiency testing, calibration to 17/25, testing to 17/25, inspection, bodies accreditation to 17/20, certification, accreditation to 17/21, 24, and 65, as well as veterinary laboratory accreditation, because it becomes important, especially in this era of zoonotic diseases. Like in the case of COVID, initially we didn't know where it started from. We still don't know. Maybe it was coming from monkeys, or is it bats in China? We don't know yet, or maybe we know anyway. So the aspect of one world zoonotic testing or veterinary laboratory within medical testing becomes very important. So that accreditation is there, and it's actually there, and we are offering that. So KENAS, we have accredited so many CABs, conformity assessment bodies, across Africa. And we currently have accredited in 8 African countries, from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Gambia, Ghana, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Somaliland. Yes, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Doris Mengo. Very heavy office and responsibility in Kenya. I would want us to dive into Q&A, and I would request you to go straight and sit in front there.
Thanks everyone for attending this presentation. My question goes direct to Doris. Thanks for the presentation on the roles of PT in accreditation. We know PT is very critical, without which a lab can never get accredited. From the journey you've walked in us, seem a lot of labs have been accredited, and you're part of that. I have only one question. Accreditation is one thing, but the bigger task remain after a lab has been accredited, sustainability, sustaining that accreditation journey. Could you share with us how you have helped this accredited lab to sustain accreditation? I heard you talk about HuQAS was maintained for 12 years. So we want to know some of the techniques and methodology you have worked in the lab to sustain this very important course. Thank you.
Now my question, a major question comes in. As Uganda, as Kenya, as low middle income statuses, and as Africa, how ready have we built our systems such that these systems go away from
mobilizing the lab, mobilizing the personnel to get accreditation. Because we have realized that after getting accreditation, we can lobby for some things which we may not, if we have not achieved so. For example, in Uganda currently, there is this so-called GCC accreditation for these bodies which are going to be testing these girls and young boys who are going to the Gulf countries for work. But you realize that we are just mobilizing these labs, having documentation on, having the processes aligned to the accreditation process. But after accreditation, I don't know whether somebody has done a study about that. Do we still work to deliver to that accreditation, or we have that certificate pinned such that we can harvest money? To our panelists, then you can answer that question. How are we checking that these facilities deliver to that standard for which they are accredited against? I thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Dear presenters, my question goes to Doris. I'm so glad to hear your experience of accreditation. Having a national accreditation body is actually kudos to Kenya. As in Ugandan experience, we have more private laboratories accredited than private facilities. Actually, the private ones are very few which are accredited. So to your experience as a KENAS, do you have a bigger proportion of private laboratories accredited? And if yes, which strategy have you put in place? Could you have either put on waiving of fees for application of the accreditation? We would like to hear that strategy of how you have brought private laboratories onto the accreditation system. Then about biorisk management, have you as KENAS, are you doing certification of laboratories in biorisk management? And if yes, how is the uptake and to which extent? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have the last.
Diana is my name.
Thank you, Diana. The last question right there.
My name is Monica. My question goes to Doris. If for the PT proficiency testing, I've heard you mention that the body must be, the offering organization must be accredited. What happens to those samples that maybe we get from another lab on instances we are not able to purchase our EQA materials? And then question 2 to you, is it possible to have a standardized mentorship programs, especially in Kenya, because we've seen instances where every mentor comes with their own version and it brings confusion to the system. Then to Julie, maybe I would like to hear what measures you've put in place to sustain the gains on the work you've done. Thank you.
I had ruled that. Okay, give it to him.
Good afternoon. My name is Ivan. I work with Cambridge Health. My question goes to Ms. Doris, because these days anyone who can afford IDTs can be able to open up a lab. My question is, what measures do we have in place to start by accrediting startup labs before they actually come into operation, because we have so many discrepancies in lab results that are given out that ends up diluting the laboratory process. Thank you.
My name is Natural Aisha. Well, I had many, but I'm going to zero on one about human resource development following accreditation. And how are you going to emphasize this human resource development in accreditation? How?
My question is to Doris. You talked about using PT as HuQAS, but I would like to know under which conditions. For example, if my lab failed PT, can I still go ahead and use it as my HuQAS? And of course, they usually Some of them are little, some of them have short expiries. Under which conditions should I use that PT as my HuQAS in the lab?
Okay, so I'll start with the first one from the lady who was seated at the back. So, would you need to involve a PT provider when it comes to issues root cause analysis? Well, it depends, right? It depends with the magnitude or what you have done internally. So, one challenge I have realized with laboratories is the aspect that they're not able to do a proper root cause analysis. So, if you're not able to do a proper root cause analysis, you'll not know the problem, hence, you really requiring to go to the PT provider. It is not a problem, by the way. I think the PT provider in their standard, they have been told that they shall give service to their customer. So it is fine. It is fine to actually consult them where you really need to consult them to see what the root cause is. But I would urge that you acquaint yourself with proper root cause analysis before going to the PT provider. Until when it's necessary, then you can go. But it's not a crime. Then the other question was on sustainability. I think Julie has touched on that a lot. It is possible to sustain your accreditation after the initial accreditation. So, of course, when it comes to the public, the government laboratories, we need to move from the mindset of sponsorship. Yes, it's the sponsors who have pushed us to the initial accreditation, but moving forth, we need to, get out of that. Remember, sponsors are only here for a limited time, right? So does it mean when they go, they also go with the accreditation? No, it shouldn't be the case. So then we need to do what Julie is doing with Bagathi Hospital. But there is also an aspect of top management commitment. Even before the donors come in, or even when they come in, top management then has to commit to ensure that they will sustain accreditation. But it's not only coming from top management and them giving the budget. Of course, it needs to be budgeted for it to be sustained, but also commitment from staff. Lab people, I just don't know what is our problem. We think the lab belongs to other people, or whatever quality belongs to the quality person, and all of us don't want to be committed. But if we are committed, then we'll be able to sustain this. Then, of course, we need to make it a culture, right? Making quality a culture. And if you make it a culture, we even encourage top management to continue supporting us at the end of the day. And of course, as Julie has said, there is increased money with accreditation. Maybe that's something we don't know, or we know, but we have decided to put it on the carpet. For the private laboratories, they will tell you, once they're accredited, the income goes up. Why does it go up? Because they have more clients coming in. So the issue of sustainability when it comes to finances becomes an issue of, many years, it's an old issue really, because you really get money from your income to sustain accreditation, but be committed to all that. It makes your work much easier. Then there was a question of proportion of private to public laboratories. So when we started off accreditation, because of the support that we had from partners, there was a higher uptake of accreditation in the public sector. And that's obvious because there is support. Private sector was somewhat left behind until they realized they needed a market share when it came to the market, really, at the end of the day. So the first 5-6 years, more public laboratories had been accredited, but the last 3 years, we are seeing an increment in the private sector coming in for accreditation, and that is for obvious reasons. They will be left behind and they will not make income. But right now, well, they just have to come for accreditation for that basic purpose. Private sector, their essence, one, apart from offering services, is to make money. How would you make money if you're not recognized? So they are coming in. Then issues regarding biorisk management. We don't certify as KENAS on biorisk management. However, ISO 15189 clause 4.14.6 talks about risk management, right? So we can use this standard really to ensure that we do risk assessment at the end of the day. If you require certification, maybe UNBS or any other certification body can offer this, but that standard becomes a good tool to implement that specific clause when it comes to ISO 15189. PT for non-accredited, from non-accredited PT providers, of course, with your current standard, 15189, it is a recommendation that you use PTs that are accredited. With KENAS, we say it is good to use a PT that is accredited. But going forth, starting next year, it will be mandatory, so we don't have a choice. So then what do we do for people who cannot afford? Sometimes when I hear that affording, I don't know if it's an issue of affording or it's an issue of top management commitments. Because if you are committed to accreditation, then you realize accreditation comes with some costs. And these are good costs. However, they could be high. So if your management is committed, then they would bring this aspect. But I understand that there are instances where we want accreditation and we are not able to participate in that. From the accreditation point of view, it is hard. Now, this is where we can allow you to participate in an ILC that is not accredited. We will allow you to do that in a case where the PT is not available. Like, for example, when COVID came, right? When COVID came, there was no PT provider. So you would do interlaboratory comparison. But even when you're doing interlaboratory comparison, in that sense where PT is not available in your country or your region, then at that point it needs to be done in line with specific guidelines from whichever accreditation body you're seeking accreditation from. From KENAS, we have a guideline on ILC. I know SANAS has one, but this is only when the PT is not available. When it is available, it is a requirement that you participate. Mentorship approach. We need one approach. That was a comment from someone. Yes, I understand. I have been in this game since 2008, and I see the different ways mentors approach ISO 15189. Some very good, some heartbreaking as an accreditation body. So what we have decided as KENAS, come next year when this new standard is out, all our mentors will need to be trained by KENAS on the requirements of the standard and what we require for them to know before going to the laboratories to assist them. And why are we doing this? Because we need all of us to have a common approach. It breaks my heart when the laboratory spends so much money on mentorship, then we go there as accreditation bodies and we ask, now who did this? Who was this really? Who did this? Yet the lab has spent so much. And the lab has to go back to look for more funds to pay a mentor. So we will have a common approach come next year. Mentors, I'm sorry, but isn't it good to have a common approach so that we help our facilities? Yes, I think it is. The other thing is measures that are in place to accredit startups. We can accredit a new lab, and we can accredit a lab that is 100 years old. The difference is a system that you have put in place. But even as you're coming for accreditation as a startup, you must demonstrate competence. And competence cannot be demonstrated without you doing testing. Meaning, you can't open a lab today and you're not testing and you bring it for accreditation. What will we be looking at? Nothing, right? So even though you're a startup, please do some tests, right? Participate in PT, EQA, have that quality management system in line with ISO 15189 or whatever system you are implementing. Then you can come in for accreditation. You don't have to be 50 years old or 10 years old. All you need to do is ensure that you have a system in place. Then issues of human resource development when it comes to accreditation. I think the standard is very clear when it comes to continuing education and training of your staff. Clause 5.2. Remember, Clause 5.2 has a component of training. Actually, I think, no, 5.1, sorry. I'm growing old. 5.1. 5.1.6 has a component of training. So all staff shall be trained, not specific staff. All staff shall be trained. And when it comes to continual educational development, then you're required to have a program, and the program is not only for a few staff, it is all of us. So if we implement the standard the way it should be implemented, then we will not have this thing of saying it's only a few people who are being trained, but everyone in the laboratory needs to be trained, and there has to be a program which shows we have 15 staff in the laboratory. Then what is our plan? The quality manager, what is your plan to ensure that everyone who is in your laboratory has been trained? So the only way to deal with this is implementing the standard the way it should be implemented. Then the other and this is the last one, which conditions can you use PT as IQC? One, it depends with the quantities, right? So if you have sufficient quantities of EQA, then you can subsequently use it as your IQC materials. I hope our providers give us sufficient PT materials which we can use. But I'm looking at a discipline like microbiology, where you can grow the bacteria, enumeration of bacteria, right? If you enumerate that bacteria, you grow it subculture and subculture, can't that bacteria be used, or can that PT be used as IQC? It can. Remember, where are the PT providers getting this bacteria from? They are getting it from the ATCC, pure breed. So if you're getting this as a pure breed as part of our ATCC, why not take it and subculture and then you use it for your IQC or as part of your IQC? And I think I'm done with my questions.